bear cub stuck inside a school locker after the bell. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The afternoon sun was getting low when the last school bell rang at Maplewood Elementary. Kids rushed out of their classrooms, their voices echoing through the empty hallways as they grabbed their backpacks and ran toward the buses. But in classroom 3B, something was different today. Ruby Chen sat at her desk, organizing the day's papers while her 6-month-old daughter, Lily, played quietly in her portable crib nearby. Ruby was a new teacher at the school, and bringing Lily to work had become their daily routine since her husband started working the night shift at the hospital. The baby gurgled softly, reaching for the colorful toys hanging above her. "Just a few more minutes, sweetheart," Ruby whispered to Lily, not knowing that these would be the most important few minutes of their lives. Outside the classroom window, something moved in the school garden. A small brown shape pushed through the bushes near the back door of the school. It was a bear cub, no bigger than a medium-sized dog, with fur that looked soft and innocent. The cub had wandered away from its mother while she searched for food in the nearby forest. The sweet smell of leftover lunch from the cafeteria had drawn the little creature closer to the building. The cub's tiny nose twitched as it caught another scent. Something even more interesting than food. It was the smell of curiosity, of adventure, of a place it had never been before. The back door of the school had been left open by the janitor who was still cleaning the cafeteria. Ruby finished stacking the last of her papers and looked at her watch. Most of the staff had already gone home, and the building felt unusually quiet. She could hear the distant sound of the janitor's radio playing soft music from somewhere down the hall. Lily had grown sleepy, her tiny fists rubbing her eyes as she fought against the drowsiness. "Okay, baby girl, let's get you home," Ruby said, reaching for her purse. But as she stood up, she heard something strange. A soft scratching sound coming from somewhere in the building. She paused, listening carefully, but the sound stopped. The bear cub had found its way inside the school and was now wandering down the main hallway. Its small paws made barely any sound on the polished floor as it explored this new world of lockers, classroom doors, and bulletin boards covered with colorful student artwork. Everything was so different from the forest where it lived with its mother. The cub stopped in front of a row of student lockers. One of them was slightly open. A student had forgotten to close it properly after grabbing their jacket. The cub's curiosity got the better of it, and it nosed the locker door open wider. Inside, it could smell the lingering scents of a child's lunch, some crayons, and something sweet. Without thinking, the small bear squeezed itself into the locker, trying to reach whatever was causing that interesting smell. But as it pushed deeper inside, its weight shifted against the door. The locker door swung shut with a loud clang that echoed through the empty hallway. The cub was trapped. At first, the little bear didn't understand what had happened. It tried to turn around in the small space, but the locker was too narrow. Panic began to set in as the cub realized it couldn't get out. It started to whimper, soft, frightened sounds that would break anyone's heart if they could hear them. Back in classroom 3B, Ruby had just picked up Lily when she heard that distant, clanging sound. She frowned, wondering if the janitor had dropped something. But then she heard something else, something that made her blood run cold. It was a sound she had never heard before in a school building, a sound that didn't belong. It was the sound of a scared, trapped animal crying for help. Lily, who had been drowsy just moments before, suddenly became alert. Her big brown eyes opened wide, and she turned her head toward the door of the classroom, as if she too had heard something unusual. The baby made a soft cooing sound, as if she was trying to communicate something important to her mother. "Did you hear that too, sweetheart?" Ruby whispered, holding Lily closer to her chest. The baby's tiny hand reached out toward the door, and for a moment Ruby could have sworn her daughter was trying to tell her something. The cub's cries were getting louder now, echoing inside the metal locker. The poor creature was becoming more and more frightened with each passing second. It clawed at the inside of the locker door, its small paws scratching desperately against the cold metal. But the door wouldn't budge. Ruby stood in her classroom doorway, listening intently. The building was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. The janitor's radio had stopped playing, and even the usual sounds of traffic from the street outside seemed muffled. All she could hear now were those strange, heartbreaking whimpers coming from somewhere down the hall. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. "Is someone there?" But there was no answer, only the continued sound of something small and frightened trying desperately to escape from wherever it was trapped. As Ruby stepped into the hallway with Lily in her arms, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. There were small, muddy paw prints on the clean floor, prints that definitely didn't belong to any dog or cat. They were perfectly round, with tiny claw marks, leading from the back entrance all the way down the main corridor toward the lockers. Lily suddenly became very still in her mother's arms. The baby's eyes were fixed on something at the far end of the hallway, and she made a soft whimpering sound that seemed to echo the cries they were hearing. It was as if the 6-month-old could sense the fear and desperation of whatever creature was trapped nearby. "It's okay, baby," Ruby whispered, but her own voice was shaking now. She had grown up in the mountains and knew those paw prints belonged to a bear, a young one, by the size of the tracks. Her mind raced with questions. How had a bear cub gotten into the school? Where was its mother? And most importantly, what should she do now? The whimpering sounds were getting weaker, as if whatever was making them was losing hope. Ruby followed the paw prints down the hallway, her heart pounding with each step. Lily remained unusually quiet, as if she understood the seriousness of the situation. The baby's tiny fingers clutched at her mother's shirt, and her breathing had become quick and shallow. When Ruby reached the row of lockers where the sounds were coming from, she stopped and listened carefully. The whimpering was definitely coming from inside one of the lockers, locker number 47 to be exact. She could hear tiny claws scratching against metal, and occasionally a soft thump as something small threw itself against the door. "Oh my God," Ruby breathed, realizing what had happened. A bear cub had somehow gotten itself trapped inside a student's locker. She looked down at Lily, who was staring at the locker with wide, concerned eyes. The baby reached out her small hand toward locker 47, making gentle cooing sounds as if she was trying to comfort whatever was inside. Ruby's mind raced through her options. She could call 911, but what would she tell them? She could try to find the janitor, but she hadn't seen him for the past hour. She could leave the building and get help, but that would mean abandoning the trapped cub, and from the sound of its weakening cries it might not have much time left. As she stood there trying to decide what to do, something unexpected happened. Lily began to make soft, rhythmic sounds, not quite crying, but not quite cooing either. It was a sound Ruby had never heard her daughter make before, almost like she was trying to sing or hum, and incredibly, the scratching sounds from inside the locker began to slow down. The bear cub had heard Lily's voice. Ruby watched in amazement as her baby continued to make those gentle, soothing sounds. The desperate scratching from inside the locker stopped completely, replaced by what sounded like sniffling and soft whimpering. It was as if Lily's voice had somehow calmed the terrified animal. "How are you doing that, sweetheart?" Ruby whispered to her daughter. Lily looked up at her mother for a moment, then turned back toward the locker and continued her soft humming. The baby's little hand was still stretched out toward the metal door, fingers opening and closing as if she was trying to reach the creature inside. But then Ruby heard something that made her blood turn to ice. From somewhere outside the building came a deep, rumbling growl. It was the sound of an adult bear, a mother bear who had likely been searching for her missing cub. The growl was getting closer, which meant the mother bear was approaching the school. Ruby's hands began to shake as she realized the true danger of their situation. If the mother bear found her way into the building and discovered humans near her trapped cub, the results could be catastrophic. Adult bears were incredibly protective of their young and would attack anything they perceived as a threat. The growling outside grew louder, and Ruby could hear heavy footsteps moving around the building. The mother bear was definitely looking for a way inside. Ruby knew she had to make a decision quickly, try to free the cub, and hope the mother would be grateful, or get herself and Lily out of the building before the mother bear found them. But as she started to back away from the lockers, Lily did something that changed everything. The baby began to cry, not her usual fussy cry, but a heartbroken wail that seemed to come from deep inside her tiny chest. It was the cry of a child who understood that another baby was in trouble and needed help. The sound of Lily's crying had an immediate effect on the bear cub trapped in the locker. The animal began to whimper in response as if it was trying to answer the human baby's call. The two babies, one human, one bear, were somehow communicating with each other through their cries. Ruby stood frozen in the hallway, holding her crying daughter while listening to the bear cub's answering whimpers and the mother bear's increasingly frantic growls from outside. She had never felt so helpless in her life. Every instinct told her to run, to get her baby to safety, but something deeper, a mother's understanding of another mother's fear, kept her feet planted in place. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway behind her. "Mrs. Chen, are you still here?" came a man's voice. It was Marcus Williams, the school janitor, pushing his cleaning cart down the corridor. He stopped when he saw Ruby standing in front of the lockers with her crying baby. "Marcus, thank God you're here," Ruby said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a bear cub trapped in this locker, and I think its mother is outside trying to get in." Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. "A what now?" he asked, moving closer to listen. As if on cue, the cub let out another series of whimpers from inside locker 47, and they could all hear the mother bear's growls getting closer to the back entrance of the school. "How in the world?" Marcus began, but he was cut off by the sound of metal creaking from the direction of the back door. The mother bear had found the entrance and was trying to push her way inside. Lily's crying intensified, as if she could sense the approaching danger. Her tiny fists waved in the air, and she kept reaching toward the locker where the cub was trapped. It was clear that the baby understood, in her own innocent way, that another baby needed help, and she wasn't going to give up on it. "We need to get that cub out of there before its mother gets inside," Marcus said, reaching for his keys. "If she finds us near her baby, she's going to think we're the ones who hurt it." Ruby nodded, still trying to calm Lily, who continued to make those soft humming sounds between her tears. The baby seemed determined to comfort the trapped cub, even though she didn't fully understand the danger they were all in. As Marcus fumbled with his keys, looking for the master key that would open all the lockers, they heard a loud crash from the back of the building. The mother bear had broken through the door and was now inside the school. Her heavy footsteps echoed through the hallways as she began to search for her missing cub, following the same scent trail that had led the little one into this trap. The race against time had begun. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly that he dropped his keys twice. The sound of metal hitting the floor seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Each time the keys fell, Lily would stop her humming for a moment and look at Marcus with those big, understanding eyes, as if she was trying to tell him to hurry. Come on, Marcus whispered to himself, finally finding the right key. But just as he was about to insert it into the lock, they heard the mother bear's footsteps stop. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise had been. Ruby held Lily closer to her chest, feeling her daughter's rapid heartbeat against her own. The baby had stopped crying but continued to make those soft, comforting sounds toward the locker. It was as if she knew that staying quiet might keep them all safe, but she couldn't abandon her mission to help the trapped cub. Then they heard it, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the very walls of the building. The mother bear was sniffing the air, trying to locate her cub's exact position. Her massive nose was following the scent trail that would lead her directly to locker 47, where they were all standing. "She's getting closer," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can hear her in the science wing now." Ruby's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out of this situation. The main exit was in the opposite direction from where the mother bear had entered, but they would have to pass several intersecting hallways to reach it. If the bear saw them, especially near her cub, she would charge without hesitation. But then, something unexpected happened. Lily suddenly became very still in her mother's arms and turned her head toward the opposite end of the hallway. Not toward where the mother bear was approaching, but toward the school's front entrance. The baby's eyes grew wide, and she pointed one tiny finger down the corridor. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ruby whispered, following her daughter's gaze. At first, she saw nothing but empty hallway, but then, in the dim light filtering through the front doors, she noticed movement. Another figure was entering the school. Ruby's heart sank as she realized their situation had just become even more complicated. But as the figure came closer, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the town's veterinarian, still wearing her scrubs from the animal clinic. Sarah had been driving past the school when she noticed the broken back door and decided to investigate. "Ruby, what are you doing here so late?" Sarah called out softly as she approached. But before Ruby could answer, Sarah's trained ear picked up the sound of the bear cubs whimpering from inside the locker. Her expression immediately changed from confusion to understanding. "Oh no," Sarah breathed. "That's a bear cub, isn't it?" Ruby nodded frantically. "It's trapped in the locker, and its mother just broke into the building. She's coming this way." Sarah's veterinary training kicked in immediately. She had dealt with wild animals before, including bears, and she knew exactly how dangerous this situation was. But she also knew that the cub would die if they left it trapped much longer. The stress and lack of air in the small space could kill a young animal within hours. "Marcus, do you have that locker open yet?" Sarah asked, pulling a small flashlight from her pocket and kneeling down beside locker 47. She could hear the cub's breathing. It was becoming shallow and rapid, signs of extreme distress. "Almost got it," Marcus replied, his hand steadier now that help had arrived. The key turned in the lock with a soft click, but he hesitated before opening the door. "What if it attacks us when we let it out?" "It won't," Sarah assured him. "It's just a baby, and it's more scared than we are, but we need to be ready for its mother." As if summoned by Sarah's words, they heard the mother bear's footsteps again, closer now. She was in the main hallway, probably only 50 feet away from where they stood. Her heavy breathing echoed off the walls, and they could hear her claws clicking against the floor tiles with each step. Lily, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly made a decision that would change everything. The baby wiggled in her mother's arms and reached both tiny hands toward the locker door. When Ruby tried to pull her back, Lily let out a soft whine, not a cry, but a sound of determination that seemed to say she wasn't going anywhere until the cub was free. "She wants to help," Sarah observed, watching the baby's behavior with fascination. "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if she can sense what the cub is feeling." Ruby looked down at her daughter, seeing something in Lily's eyes that she had never seen before. The baby wasn't just trying to help. She was communicating with the trapped animal in a way that none of the adults could understand. Every sound Lily made seemed to calm the cub, and every time the cub whimpered, Lily responded with gentle coos. "Open the door," Sarah said firmly, but slowly, and be ready to step back. Marcus took a deep breath and carefully pulled the locker door open. Inside, curled up in the small space, was the most pitiful sight any of them had ever seen. The bear cub was no bigger than a large puppy, with matted brown fur and frightened dark eyes. It was shaking from fear and exhaustion, and there were small scratches on its paws from trying to claw its way out. The moment the door opened, the cub looked up at them with those terrified eyes. But instead of trying to run or attack, something incredible happened. The cub's gaze fell on baby Lily, and its expression completely changed. The fear seemed to melt away, replaced by curiosity and what could only be described as recognition. Lily made one of her soft humming sounds, and the cub responded with a gentle whimper that sounded almost like a purr. The two babies looked at each other for a long moment, as if they were having a conversation that only they could understand. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Marcus whispered, staring at the interaction between the human baby and the bear cub. But their moment of wonder was interrupted by a sound that made them all freeze. The mother bear's footsteps had stopped again, but this time they could hear her breathing just around the corner. She was less than 20 feet away now, and she had definitely caught the scent of her cub. Sarah quickly assessed their options. The cub was free, but still weak and scared. The mother bear was about to round the corner and discover them all standing near her baby. And they had a 6-month-old human infant who seemed determined to stay and help the bear cub no matter what. "We need to get the cub back to its mother without her thinking we hurt it," Sarah said quietly. "If she sees us as a threat—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what an angry mother bear could do to protect her young. But then Lily did something that left them all speechless. The baby reached out toward the bear cub with one tiny hand, making gentle cooing sounds. And incredibly, the cub responded by taking a small, shaky step toward her. The little bear was drawn to Lily just as much as she was drawn to it. "They're bonding," Sarah breathed in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this between different species, especially not with babies this young." The bear cub took another step toward Lily, and for a moment it looked like it might actually climb out of the locker completely. But before it could move any further, they heard a sound that made their hearts stop. A deep, protective growl echoed through the hallway, so close now that they could feel the vibrations in the floor. The mother bear had found them. Ruby instinctively pulled Lily back, but the baby fought against her mother's arms, reaching desperately toward the bear cub. She seemed to understand that separating from the cub now might mean never seeing it again. Her soft whimpers mixed with the cub's frightened cries, creating a heartbreaking duet of two babies who had found each other but were about to be torn apart. The mother bear's shadow appeared on the wall at the end of the hallway. In seconds, she would round the corner and see them all standing near her trapped cub. Sarah, Marcus, and Ruby all held their breath, knowing that the next few moments would determine whether they all made it out of this situation alive. But what happened next was something none of them could have predicted, and it would be talked about in their small town for years to come. As the massive mother bear rounded the corner, her dark eyes immediately locked onto the group of humans standing near her cub. She was enormous, at least 6 feet tall when standing on her hind legs, with thick brown fur and powerful muscles that rippled under her coat. her lips pulled back to reveal sharp white teeth, and a growl rumbled deep in her chest like thunder before a storm. Ruby's entire body tensed as she prepared to shield Lily from the charging bear. Marcus stepped protectively in front of both of them, even though he knew he would be no match for an angry mother bear. Sarah remained perfectly still, her veterinary training telling her that any sudden movement could trigger an attack. But then, something extraordinary happened. Baby Lily, instead of crying or showing fear at the sight of the massive bear, stretched out both of her tiny arms toward the mother bear and made the same gentle humming sound she had been making to comfort the cub. The sound was soft and melodic, like a lullaby without words. The mother bear stopped dead in her tracks. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the huge animal stared at the small human baby with an expression of complete confusion. Her growl faded to silence, and her head tilted slightly to one side as if she was trying to understand what she was seeing and hearing. The bear cub, still sitting at the edge of the open locker, looked back and forth between its mother and Lily. Then it did something that made everyone's jaw drop. The little cub began to make soft chirping sounds, the same rhythm and tone as Lily's humming. The two babies were harmonizing with each other, creating a sound that was both beautiful and impossible. Ruby felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her 6-month-old daughter somehow communicate with wild bears in a language that no human had ever heard before. The mother bear took a slow step forward, her massive paws making barely a whisper on the floor. But instead of aggression, there was curiosity in her movements now. "Nobody move," Sarah whispered so quietly that her words were barely audible. "Let them work this out." The mother bear came closer, her huge head lowering until she was at eye level with baby Lily. The two females, one human, one bear, looked directly at each other. Lily continued her gentle humming, and incredibly, the mother bear began to make soft, chuffing sounds in response. It was as if they were having a conversation about their babies. Marcus couldn't believe what he was witnessing. In all his 60 years of life, he had never seen anything like this. Wild animals were supposed to be unpredictable and dangerous, especially when protecting their young. But here was a mother bear having what appeared to be a peaceful discussion with a human baby. The bear cub, gaining confidence from its mother's calm behavior, climbed completely out of the locker and took several small steps toward Lily. The baby reached down from her mother's arms, her tiny fingers barely able to touch the top of the cub's soft head. The moment their skin and fur made contact, both babies made contented sounds that filled the hallway with an odd sense of peace. "This is impossible," Sarah murmured, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Interspecies communication like this doesn't happen, especially not between babies who haven't even learned to speak yet. But Ruby was beginning to understand something that the others hadn't realized yet. She had always known that Lily was special, not just because she was her daughter, but because of the way the baby reacted to animals. At home, wild birds would come to their windows when Lily was nearby. Stray cats would appear in their yard and sit peacefully while Lily watched them from her high chair. Even insects seemed drawn to the baby's presence. "She's always been like this," Ruby whispered, still afraid to speak too loudly. "Animals are drawn to her. I thought it was just coincidence, but now..." The mother bear had moved even closer, until she was only a few feet away from Ruby and Lily. At this distance, they could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she was carefully studying the human baby. The bear's breathing was slow and controlled, no longer the rapid panting of an angry, searching mother. Then the cub did something that made them all gasp. It stood up on its hind legs, just like its mother, and reached up toward Lily with both front paws. The baby giggled, and clapped her hands together in delight. The sound of her laughter seemed to enchant both bears even more. But just when it seemed like everything was going to be okay, they heard new sounds from outside the building. Car doors were slamming, and there were voices shouting orders. Someone had called the police. "Oh no," Marcus breathed. "If they come in here with guns and sirens—" Sarah's face went pale as she realized what he meant. The arrival of law enforcement would shatter this peaceful moment and likely result in both bears being shot as dangerous animals. The mother bear's protective instincts would kick in again, and the magical connection between Lily and the bear cub would be lost forever. The mother bear's ears perked up at the sound of the approaching humans. Her body tensed, and the growl began to return to her throat. She was caught between her desire to protect her cub and her confusion about these strange humans who seemed to mean no harm. Ruby made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Still holding Lily, she took a step toward the mother bear and began to hum along with her daughter. Her voice was shaky at first, but as she found the same rhythm that Lily had been using, the mother bear's growl faded once again. "Ruby, what are you doing?" Marcus whispered frantically. "I'm trying to keep the peace until we can figure out how to get them safely back to the forest," Ruby replied, never taking her eyes off the mother bear. "If the police come in here and see this as a threat—" She didn't need to finish. They all knew what would happen. Sarah pulled out her cell phone and quickly dialed a number. "Chief Peterson, this is Dr. Mitchell. I'm at the elementary school and we have a situation that requires your immediate attention, but not in the way you might think." While Sarah spoke quietly into her phone, trying to explain the incredible situation to the police chief, something else was happening between the babies. The bear cub had begun to explore the hallway, but it kept returning to a spot directly below where Lily was standing. Each time it came back, it would look up at her and make soft chirping sounds. Lily responded by reaching down with both hands, trying to touch the cub again. Ruby, following her instincts, slowly knelt down so that Lily could be closer to her new friend. The mother bear watched this interaction carefully but showed no signs of aggression. "They're playing," Sarah observed with wonder, having finished her phone call. "The cub is actually playing with Lily." It was true. The bear cub would walk a few steps away, then return to Lily, almost like a game of peekaboo. Each time it came back, Lily would giggle and reach for it. The mother bear seemed to understand that this was play behavior, something that young mammals of all species engaged in. But the sounds from outside were getting closer. Heavy footsteps were approaching the main entrance, and they could hear radio chatter from police officers preparing to enter the building. "Chief Peterson is coming in alone and unarmed," Sarah announced. "I explained the situation, and he's agreed to assess things before taking any action. But we need to show him that everyone is safe." The mother bear's hearing was much sharper than theirs, and she had already detected the approaching human. Her body language shifted slightly, becoming more alert, but she remained calm as long as Lily continued her gentle humming. Then they heard a new voice from the front entrance. "Dr. Mitchell, it's Chief Peterson. I'm coming in slowly." The police chief appeared at the far end of the hallway, moving with careful, deliberate steps. Tom Peterson had been the police chief in their small town for over 20 years, and he had seen plenty of unusual situations, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw that evening. A mother bear and her cub, both calm and peaceful, sharing space with 3 adults and a baby in the middle of an elementary school hallway. The human baby was making soft sounds that seemed to be keeping everyone relaxed, while the bear cub played nearby like a friendly puppy. "Well, I'll be damned," Chief Peterson said under his breath, stopping about 15 feet away from the group. "Doc, you weren't kidding when you said this was unusual." The mother bear noticed the new human but didn't react aggressively. She seemed to understand that as long as her cub was safe and happy, these humans posed no threat, but they all knew this peaceful moment couldn't last forever. "Chief, we need to figure out how to get them back to the forest safely," Sarah said quietly. The cub was trapped for quite a while, and the mother broke in looking for it. But somehow, Ruby's baby has been keeping everyone calm. Chief Peterson studied the scene carefully, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. He had handled wildlife situations before, but usually they involved tranquilizer guns and animal control officers. This was completely different. "How long have they been like this?" he asked. "About 20 minutes, Ruby replied, still humming softly with Lily. "Ever since we freed the cub from the locker." As if understanding that they were talking about it, the bear cub looked up at the humans and made its chirping sound again. Lily immediately responded with her gentle humming, and the two babies continued their mysterious conversation. "I've never seen anything like this," Chief Peterson admitted. "It's like they're talking to each other." But then something happened that would test everyone's nerves and change the course of the entire evening. From somewhere deep in the forest behind the school, they heard another sound, the call of a male bear, much deeper and more powerful than anything they had heard so far. The father bear had arrived, and he was looking for his family. The mother bear's entire demeanor changed instantly. Her head snapped toward the sound, and a low rumble began in her chest. This wasn't the angry growl they had heard before. This was something different, almost like she was calling back to her mate. The peaceful atmosphere in the hallway shifted as everyone realized their situation had just become much more complicated. Chief Peterson immediately reached for his radio, but Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "Wait," she whispered. "Let's see how the mother reacts first. If we call for backup now, we might have a shootout with 2 adult bears and innocent people caught in the middle." The bear cub, sensing the change in its mother's mood, moved closer to her massive form. But instead of staying there, it did something that surprised everyone. The little cub looked back at Lily and made a soft whimpering sound, as if it was torn between staying with its family and maintaining its connection with the human baby. Lily seemed to understand the cub's confusion. She reached out both arms toward the small bear, not to grab it, but as if she was giving it permission to go. Her humming changed to a softer, more gentle tone that somehow conveyed comfort and understanding. Ruby felt her heart breaking as she watched her daughter say goodbye to her new friend. But what happened next was even more remarkable. As the cub started to move toward its mother, Lily began to make a new sound. Not humming this time, but what could only be described as a lullaby. She was singing to the bear cub in her own baby language, a song of friendship and farewell. The mother bear stopped her rumbling and turned to look at Lily again. For a moment, her massive head tilted as she listened to the human baby's song. Then, incredibly, she began to make soft chuffing sounds in harmony with Lily's lullaby. The two mothers, human and bear, were sharing a moment of understanding that transcended species. Marcus wiped tears from his eyes as he watched this impossible scene. In all his years as a school janitor, he had seen thousands of children, but he had never witnessed anything like the connection between baby Lily and these wild bears. It was as if the little girl possessed some kind of gift that allowed her to speak to animals in their own language. But their tender moment was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps outside the back entrance. The father bear was approaching the school, following the same path his family had taken. His breathing was deep and powerful, and they could hear branches breaking as he pushed through the small trees and bushes around the building. "He's coming inside," Chief Peterson said quietly, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "A male bear protecting his family is the most dangerous animal on Earth." Sarah nodded grimly. She had treated injuries from bear attacks before, and she knew the chief was right. Male bears were territorial and aggressive, especially when they perceived a threat to their cubs. Unlike the mother bear, who had been focused on finding and protecting her young, the father would see the humans as enemies to be eliminated. Ruby looked down at Lily, who was still singing her soft lullaby to the bear cub. The baby seemed completely unaware of the danger approaching, lost in her innocent desire to comfort her new friend. Ruby's maternal instincts screamed at her to run, to get her daughter as far away from this situation as possible, but something deeper told her to trust in whatever gift Lily possessed. The mother bear had moved to a position between the humans and the back entrance, her massive body blocking the hallway. But she wasn't facing the humans. She was facing toward where her mate would appear, as if she was preparing to communicate with him about what she had discovered. She's going to try to tell him that we're not a threat, Sarah realized. Bears have complex communication systems. If she can convince him that we helped their cub... Her words trailed off as they heard the father bear enter the building. His footsteps were even heavier than his mate's had been, and the floor seemed to vibrate with each step. The scent of wild forest and raw power filled the air as he approached their location. The bear cub, now pressed against its mother's side, made a series of chirping sounds toward the approaching footsteps. It was telling its father about its adventure, about being trapped and then freed, about the strange human baby who had comforted it with songs. But when the father bear rounded the corner and saw the group of humans standing near his family, his reaction was immediate and terrifying. He reared up on his hind legs, standing nearly 8 feet tall, and let out a roar that shook the windows of the building. His massive arms spread wide, showing claws that were at least 4 inches long, and his teeth gleamed white and sharp in the fluorescent lighting. Everyone except Lily cowered at the sight of the enraged father bear. The baby, incredibly, continued her gentle singing, as if the roaring giant in front of her was just another friend to comfort. Chief Peterson drew his service weapon but kept it pointed at the floor. He had never shot a bear before, and he wasn't sure his bullets would do anything except make the animal more angry. Marcus positioned himself protectively in front of Ruby and Lily, even though he knew he would be no match for the massive creature. But then, something extraordinary happened that would be remembered and talked about for generations. The mother bear moved between her mate and the humans, making urgent chuffing and grunting sounds. She was clearly trying to explain the situation to him, to make him understand that these humans had not harmed their cub, but had actually helped it. The father bear lowered himself back to all fours, but continued to growl menacingly. That's when Lily did something that shocked everyone in the hallway. The 6-month-old baby, still in her mother's arms, began to sing louder. Not crying or screaming in fear, but actually raising her voice in song, as if she was trying to include the father bear in the lullaby she had been singing to his cub. Her tiny voice filled the space between the massive angry bear and the terrified humans. The father bear's growl slowly faded as he listened to the sound. His head tilted, just as his mates had done, and his dark eyes focused intently on the small human baby who was singing to him without fear. The bear cub, emboldened by its mother's protective stance and the baby's continued singing, did something that made everyone's breath catch. It walked slowly across the hallway, moving away from its parents and toward Lily. With each step, it made soft chirping sounds that matched the rhythm of the baby's lullaby. "No, don't," Ruby whispered, instinctively wanting to pull her daughter away from the approaching wild animal. But something in Lily's expression stopped her. The baby was completely focused on the bear cub, her song growing even more beautiful and complex as the little animal came closer. When the cub reached the spot directly below Lily, it stood up on its hind legs just as it had done before. Its small paws reached upward, and Lily leaned down from her mother's arms until their hands and paws touched once again. The moment of contact sent a visible wave of calm through both bear parents. The father bear's aggressive posture relaxed slightly, and the mother bear made encouraging sounds toward her mate. It was as if the cub was somehow translating Lily's peaceful intentions to its parents. Sarah watched in amazement as the family dynamic played out before them. "The cub is vouching for us," she whispered. "It's telling its parents that we're safe." But the father bear was still not completely convinced. He took several steps closer, his massive head swaying back and forth as he analyzed the scent of each human. When he reached Marcus, the bear stopped and sniffed deeply. The janitor held perfectly still, barely breathing as the huge animal examined him. Then the bear moved to Sarah, repeating the same process. The veterinarian had worked with many wild animals over the years, and her clothes carried the scents of dozens of creatures. The father bear spent a long time sniffing her, as if he was reading the story of every animal she had helped. Finally, he approached Ruby and Lily. The baby had never stopped singing, and as the massive bear came closer, her lullaby seemed to grow even more soothing. The father bear lowered his huge head until he was eye level with the human infant, just as his mate had done earlier. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the enormous wild bear and the tiny human baby looked directly at each other. Lily's song continued, soft and gentle, while the bear's breathing gradually slowed and deepened. Then the father bear did something that no one could have predicted. He made a sound deep in his throat, not a growl or a roar, but something almost musical, like a bass note in harmony with Lily's higher-pitched lullaby. The three of them, baby, cub, and father bear, were creating music together. Chief Peterson slowly holstered his weapon, realizing that whatever was happening here was beyond anything he had been trained for. This wasn't a dangerous wildlife situation that required force. This was something magical, something that belonged in fairy tales rather than police reports. But just as it seemed like the situation was completely under control, they heard sirens in the distance. Despite Sarah's call asking for patience, someone else had contacted emergency services. Multiple vehicles were approaching the school, and within minutes the building would be surrounded by firefighters, paramedics, and additional police officers who wouldn't understand the delicate balance that had been achieved. The sound of the sirens had an immediate effect on both adult bears. Their ears perked up, and the father bear's body tensed once again. The mother bear moved closer to her cub, and the peaceful atmosphere began to shift toward anxiety. "We need to get them out of here before the cavalry arrives," Chief Peterson said urgently. "If those officers come in here with lights and sirens blazing, these bears are going to panic." Ruby looked down at Lily, who had stopped singing and was now reaching desperately toward the bear cub. The baby seemed to understand that their time together was ending, and her little face was filled with an expression of sadness that was heartbreaking to see. The bear cub was having the same reaction. It was making distressed chirping sounds and trying to climb higher, as if it wanted to stay closer to Lily. The connection between the two babies was so strong that separating them was causing both of them obvious emotional pain. "There has to be another way," Ruby said, surprising herself with her words. "They don't want to leave each other." Sarah shook her head sadly. "Ruby, I know this is incredible, but they're wild animals. They belong in the forest, not in a school building, and we need to get them there before—" Her words were cut off by the sound of vehicle doors slamming in the parking lot. The emergency responders had arrived, and they would be entering the building at any moment. The magical encounter between species was about to be shattered by the harsh reality of the human world. But baby Lily had one more surprise for everyone. As the sound of heavy boots approached the main entrance, Lily suddenly stopped reaching for the bear cub and instead placed both of her tiny hands flat against her mother's chest. She looked directly into Ruby's eyes with an intensity that seemed impossible for a 6-month-old baby. Then she began to make a sound that none of them had heard before. Not humming, not singing, but something that sounded almost like words. Ma, ma, bear, Lily said clearly, her first real words spoken not to call for her mother, but to describe her new friends. Ruby's eyes filled with tears as she realized her daughter had just spoken for the first time, and her first words were about the bear family that had captured her heart. But there was something else in Lily's expression, something that looked almost like determination. The baby turned back toward the bears and made a new sound, a complex series of chirps and coos that perfectly mimicked the bear cub's communication style. But this time, she wasn't just comforting the cub, she was talking to all 3 bears, making urgent sounds that seemed to be trying to tell them something important. The father bear's ears perked up as he listened to Lily's new vocalizations. His massive head tilted from side to side, as if he was trying to understand a language he had never heard before, but somehow recognized. The mother bear moved closer, adding her own soft chuffs to the conversation. "She's warning them," Sarah breathed in amazement. "She's trying to tell them that danger is coming." It was true. Lily's sounds had taken on an urgent quality, and she kept pointing toward the main entrance where the emergency responders would soon appear. The bear cub seemed to understand immediately, making distressed chirping sounds and looking back and forth between Lily and its parents. Chief Peterson's radio crackled to life. "Chief, we have fire department, EMS, and 3 additional units outside. What's your status in there?" Before the chief could respond, they heard voices in the entrance hallway. "Police, we're coming in," someone shouted, followed by the sound of multiple people entering the building. The father bear's reaction was immediate and terrifying. He reared up on his hind legs again, but this time his roar was different, deeper, more primal, filled with the rage of a wild animal that felt cornered and threatened. The mother bear quickly moved her cub behind her massive form, preparing to defend her family against what she perceived as an invasion. But Lily did something that shocked everyone in the hallway, including the approaching officers. The baby opened her mouth and let out a sound that was part cry, part roar, part song, a noise so loud and unusual that it echoed through the entire building. It was as if she was trying to match the father bear's roar with her own voice, creating a sound that was both human and animal at the same time. The emergency responders stopped dead in their tracks. They had expected to find scared civilians hiding from dangerous bears, not a baby who seemed to be communicating with the wild animals in their own language. "What in the hell was that?" came a voice from the entrance. Chief Peterson quickly keyed his radio. "All units, hold your positions. Do not approach. I repeat, do not approach until I give the all clear." But the damage had been done. The sound of multiple humans entering the building had triggered every protective instinct in both adult bears. The father bear dropped back to all fours and began moving toward the entrance, his massive body blocking the hallway. The mother bear gathered her cub close to her side, making urgent grunting sounds that clearly meant it was time to leave. Lily's face crumpled as she watched the bear family prepare to retreat. She reached out desperately toward the cub, making heartbroken whimpering sounds that mixed with the little bear's own distressed chirps. The 2 babies were calling to each other across the growing distance, their bond stronger than the chaos erupting around them. "Wait," Ruby said suddenly, surprising everyone, including herself. "There has to be another way." She looked down at her daughter, who was still making those urgent sounds toward the bears. "She's trying to tell us something. Look at her. She's not just sad they're leaving. She's trying to solve the problem." Sarah watched Lily's behavior carefully, her veterinary training helping her read the baby's body language. "You're right, she's not giving up, she's still trying to communicate with them." As if responding to their words, Lily suddenly became very still in her mother's arms. She stopped reaching for the bears and instead began to make a new sound, a soft, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from deep in her chest. But this wasn't the lullaby she had been singing before. This was something different, something that sounded almost like a question. The bear cub heard Lily's new song and stopped trying to follow its parents. Instead, it sat down in the middle of the hallway and began to make responding sounds, not the distressed chirps from before, but thoughtful, complex vocalizations that seemed to be answering whatever Lily had asked. "They're problem-solving together," Marcus said in wonder. "Two babies who can't even walk properly are trying to figure out how to stay connected." The conversation between the babies continued for several minutes, with Lily making her questioning sounds and the cub responding with increasingly elaborate calls. The adult bears watched this exchange with fascination, their aggressive postures gradually relaxing as they focused on their cub's unusual behavior. Then, something extraordinary happened. The bear cub stood up and walked back toward Lily, but instead of trying to reach her, it began to move in a slow circle around the spot where Ruby was standing. As it walked, it made steady, rhythmic chirping sounds that matched the beat of Lily's humming. "It's showing us something," Sarah realized. "The cub is demonstrating something to its parents." The little bear completed its circle and then sat down directly in front of Lily. It looked up at the human baby and made one clear, distinct sound, a chirp that sounded almost like a word. Lily immediately responded with the same sound, creating what could only be described as their own private language. The mother bear watched this exchange with growing understanding in her dark eyes. She turned to her mate and made a series of urgent grunting sounds, as if she was explaining something important to him. The father bear's aggressive stance continued to soften as he listened to his mate and watched his cub's interaction with the human baby. From the entrance hallway, they could hear the emergency responders growing restless. "Chief, we need to know what's happening in there," someone called. "We have reports of multiple bears and civilians in danger." Chief Peterson looked around at the scene in front of him. Two adult bears who were no longer aggressive, a cub that was engaged in some kind of communication with a human baby, and three adults who were witnessing something that defied all logic and explanation. "Give me 5 more minutes," he radioed back. "The situation is complicated." But Lily wasn't finished with her surprises. The baby suddenly leaned forward in her mother's arms and made a sound that was unlike anything she had produced before. It was clear, distinct, and unmistakably directed at the bear cub. "Friend," she said, her second real word spoken as clearly as if she had been talking for months. The bear cub's reaction was immediate and emotional. It stood up on its hind legs and reached toward Lily, making soft whimpering sounds that conveyed longing and affection. The two babies looked at each other with an intensity that spoke of a connection that transcended species, age, and the impossible circumstances that had brought them together. The mother bear moved closer to her cub, but instead of pulling it away, she did something that left everyone speechless. She gently nuzzled the top of her baby's head, then looked directly at Lily and made a soft chuffing sound that could only be interpreted as acknowledgement. She was recognizing the bond between the babies. The father bear, seeing his mate's acceptance, approached the group as well. But instead of examining the humans again, he focused his attention on Lily. The massive animal lowered his head until he was at the baby's eye level, just as his mate had done before. For a long moment, the father bear and the human baby looked at each other in silence. Then, Lily did something that would be talked about in their town for decades to come. She reached out with one tiny hand and gently touched the bear's nose. The father bear didn't pull away. Instead, he made a sound deep in his throat. Not a growl, but something almost like a purr. It was a sound of acceptance, of understanding, of respect for the tiny human who had somehow earned the trust of his entire family. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by a new complication that no one had anticipated. Through the windows of the school, they could see flashing lights and the shadows of people gathering outside. Word had spread through the small town about the bears in the elementary school, and curious residents were beginning to arrive to see what was happening. "Oh no," Sarah said, looking out at the growing crowd. "If this turns into a circus." Chief Peterson was already reaching for his radio to call for crowd control when they heard a new voice from the entrance hallway. But this voice was different from the emergency responders. It was calm, gentle, and speaking in soothing tones. "Easy now, everyone. Let's just take this slow and careful." An elderly man appeared at the end of the hallway, moving with deliberate, unhurried steps. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and kind eyes that immediately took in the entire scene. Ruby recognized him as Dr. William Hartley, a retired wildlife biologist who lived on the outskirts of town. "Dr. Hartley," Sarah called softly. "How did you get past the other officers?" "Told them I was a specialist," the old man replied with a gentle smile. "Which is true in a way. I've been studying bears for over 40 years, and I've never seen anything like what I'm seeing right now." He approached slowly, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of the interaction between the human baby and the bear family. When he was about 10 feet away, he stopped and crouched down, making himself less threatening to the wild animals. "That little girl of yours has a gift," he said quietly to Ruby. "I've heard stories of people who could communicate with animals, but I always thought they were just legends." The bear cub, curious about the new human, took a few steps toward Dr. Hartley. The old man remained perfectly still, letting the young animal approach at its own pace. When the cub was close enough, it sniffed his outstretched hand, then looked back at Lily as if seeking her approval. Lily made one of her soft humming sounds, and the cub seemed to relax. It allowed Dr. Hartley to gently scratch behind its ears, something that should have been impossible with a wild bear, even a young one. "Remarkable," the biologist whispered. "The trust this baby has built with this family is extraordinary. But we have a problem." He gestured toward the windows, where more people were gathering outside. "Word is spreading fast, and pretty soon we're going to have reporters, wildlife officials, and curiosity seekers all demanding to see the miracle baby who talks to bears. That kind of attention could be dangerous for everyone involved." As if summoned by his words, they heard the sound of more vehicles arriving outside, and someone was shouting questions to the police officers trying to maintain a perimeter. "Is it true there's a baby in there with wild bears? Are the animals dangerous? Can we get some pictures?" The father bear's ears perked up at the sound of the growing crowd, and his body language began to shift back toward alertness. The mother bear moved protectively closer to her cub, and the peaceful atmosphere they had worked so hard to maintain began to fracture. But then Lily did something that surprised everyone once again. Instead of becoming upset by the noise and tension, she looked directly at Dr. Hartley and said her third clear word: "Help." The old biologist's eyes widened as he realized the baby was asking him specifically for assistance. She had somehow understood that he was different from the other adults, that he might be able to solve the problem that was growing around them. "She knows," Dr. Hartley said in amazement. "She knows I work with animals, and she's asking me to help her friends." The bear cub had moved back to its position near Lily, and the two babies resumed their soft communication. But now their sounds had taken on an urgent quality, as if they were discussing the approaching danger and trying to come up with a solution. "We need to get the bear family back to the forest before this situation gets out of hand," Dr. Hartley said. "But we also need to do it in a way that doesn't traumatize the babies or break this incredible bond they've formed." He paused, studying the interaction between Lily and the cub. "I have an idea, but it's going to require everyone to trust me, including our four-legged friends here." As he began to explain his plan, none of them could have predicted that the most challenging part of their evening was still ahead of them, and that baby Lily would once again prove that her gift for communication extended far beyond anything they had imagined. Dr. Hartley's plan was simple, but required perfect timing. He would lead the bear family through the back exit of the school, while Chief Peterson managed the crowd at the front entrance. The key was keeping Lily and the bear cub calm during the separation, which seemed almost impossible given their strong emotional bond. "The baby will need to say goodbye," Dr. Hartley explained quietly. "If we just take the bears away without letting them complete their connection, both babies could be traumatized." Ruby looked down at Lily, who was still making soft sounds toward the bear cub. The idea of her 6-month-old daughter going through emotional trauma from losing her first friend was heartbreaking, but she also knew they had no choice. "What do you need us to do?" Ruby asked. Dr. Hartley knelt down near the bear cub, speaking in the same gentle tone he had used with wild animals for decades. "Little one, it's time to go home to the forest. Your family needs to be safe." The bear cub looked at him with intelligent dark eyes, then turned to Lily as if asking for her permission. The human baby had been watching the entire conversation, and now she did something that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Lily leaned forward and placed both of her tiny hands on her heart, then reached out toward the bear cub. It was a gesture of love, of friendship, of promising to remember. The cub seemed to understand immediately and stood up on its hind legs, placing both paws over its own heart in the exact same gesture. "They're saying goodbye," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But Lily wasn't finished. She looked directly at the mother bear and made a sound that was part word, part song. "Mama bear, thank you." The mother bear's response was immediate and overwhelming. She approached Lily slowly, her massive head lowering until she was close enough to gently nuzzle the baby's hand. It was a gesture of gratitude, of respect, of acknowledgement that this tiny human had helped save her child. The father bear joined his mate, and for a moment, both adult bears flanked baby Lily like protective guardians. They made soft, chuffing sounds that seemed to be blessing the little girl who had shown them such kindness. Then Lily spoke her final words to the bear family, words that would echo in the hearts of everyone present for the rest of their lives. "Love you, bear family. Go home safe." The emotional weight of those words, spoken by a baby who had learned to talk through her connection with wild animals, was too much for the adults to bear. Ruby, Sarah, Marcus, and even Chief Peterson found themselves wiping away tears as they witnessed this impossible farewell. Dr. Hartley nodded to Chief Peterson, who immediately radioed the officers at the front entrance. "All units, create a distraction at the main entrance. Draw the crowd's attention away from the back of the building. We're facilitating a peaceful exit." As the sounds of activity increased at the front of the school, Dr. Hartley began to lead the bear family toward the back exit. The mother bear walked beside him as if she had known him for years, while the father bear brought up the rear, constantly checking behind them to make sure they weren't being followed. But the bear cub hesitated at the corner of the hallway, looking back at Lily one last time. The baby raised her tiny hand and waved, her face shining with pure love and joy despite the tears in her eyes. The cub made one final chirping sound, a sound that somehow conveyed, "Until we meet again." and then disappeared around the corner with its family. The school fell silent, except for the distant sounds of the crowd being managed outside. Ruby held Lily close, both of them staring at the empty hallway where their miraculous friends had been just moments before. "Did that really happen?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Did we really just witness a human baby talking to wild bears?" Sarah nodded slowly, still processing everything she had seen. "I'm a veterinarian, and I've never seen anything like it. The level of communication, the emotional bond, the mutual respect, it was extraordinary." Chief Peterson was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with deep conviction. "That little girl has a gift, a real gift, and those bears recognized it." But Dr. Hartley had one more surprise for them. When he returned from escorting the bear family to safety, his face was glowing with amazement. "They waited for me at the edge of the forest," he said, his voice filled with awe. All three of them turned back toward the school and made sounds, calling sounds, like they were saying thank you to everyone inside. I've never seen wild bears do anything like that. He paused, looking directly at Lily, who was now peacefully falling asleep in her mother's arms. And the cub, the little one, climbed up on a fallen log and stood up on its hind legs, looking back at the school. It stayed there for a full minute, just watching, as if it was trying to see through the walls to where its friend was. Ruby felt fresh tears on her cheeks as she imagined the bear cub's final goodbye. She looked down at Lily, who was now sleeping with a peaceful smile on her face, as if she was dreaming of playing with her bear friend in a magical forest. As they prepared to leave the school, Sarah made an observation that would stay with all of them forever. "You know, we came here tonight thinking we were rescuing a trapped animal, but maybe it was the other way around. Maybe that bear cub rescued us, showed us that love and kindness can cross any boundary, even between different species." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And maybe little Lily rescued all of us, the bears, us, everyone. She reminded us that sometimes the most powerful force in the world comes from the pure heart of a child." 3 months later, Ruby would often take Lily for walks in the forest behind their house. The baby, now crawling and saying more words every day, would always pause at a certain clearing and make soft humming sounds toward the trees. Sometimes, if they listened very carefully, they could hear answering sounds from deep in the woods, gentle chirping that sounded almost like a response. Ruby never saw the bear family again, but she knew they were there, living peacefully in their forest home. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, she was sure she could hear the sound of a young bear playing in the distance, happy and free, and remembering the human baby who had helped save its life. Dr. Hartley would later write a research paper about that extraordinary night, though he changed names and locations to protect the privacy of those involved. The scientific community was skeptical of his claims about interspecies communication, but he didn't care. He had witnessed a miracle, and no amount of academic doubt could change that. Chief Peterson never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but he kept a small photo on his desk, a picture taken through the school window of baby Lily reaching toward the bear cub. Whenever other officers complained about impossible situations, he would glance at that photo and remember that sometimes the most unlikely solutions come from the most innocent hearts. And Lily? She grew up to become a veterinarian like Sarah, dedicating her life to helping animals and studying the mysterious connections between humans and wildlife. She never forgot her first friends, the bear family who had taught her that love knows no boundaries and that kindness can create miracles. But she always kept one secret, something she never told anyone, not even her mother. Sometimes, late at night when the world was quiet, Lily could still hear them calling to her from the forest. And in her heart, she called back, sending messages of love and friendship across the darkness to the bear family who would always be a part of her soul. The extraordinary night when a baby's pure heart built a bridge between two worlds had ended, but the love that was born in that school hallway would last forever.